Has Rishi Sunak lost control of the nation's finances?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show.
Yep.
Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has laid out his budget for Britain. While many people think that his spending activities has just simply gone too far.
Yep.
Although he's certainly helped many individuals, particularly by extending the furlough system to the end of September 2021, many people believe that this is actually flawed. Lots of money has been poured into a black hole. He just simply doesn't seem to be putting money into the areas that will boost the economy. Well, Mark and Pete have the answers. Yes, we will discuss how we believe that the budget should have been structured. Well, although many people would say this is a good thing, that he has certainly helped individuals, has he gone far enough for people in the health sector, in retail, and in manufacturing and many other spaces? But it doesn't seem as though that the plans are working. The economy is still bad, and things look bleak. It seems as though he's just spending money as though it's going out of style. Good example is that Downing Street has just announced that it's going to spend £2.6 million fitting out a new media briefing room, as if everybody really needs one. Yes, it's going out of style, all this money. Spend, 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 like it's going out of style. Lend, lend, lend. The debts just quickly pile. Trend, trend, trend. The treasury is now on trial. End, end, end. Britain's future is looking vile. Clergyman
Yes.
Pete. I
Yes,
ask you,
yes.
if you were the Chancellor of the Exchequer, what would you be thinking right now?
Well, I'm reminded of that famous question where you stop a local and say, how do you get to the place I want to go? And they would say, the answer is, well, if you want to go there, I wouldn't start from here. And using that as my example, I would say that, well, I wouldn't start from here. I wouldn't have had the furlough scheme going on for so long, and I wouldn't have had the country locked down for so long, and therefore I wouldn't be in this position. So that some of that is outside of Rishi Sunak's control, and I think therein lies the problem. Our title for this episode says, "Has he lost control of the finances?" Well, he inevitably would do, because it's not within his remit. Although he's in the government, he's not the only voice there. He can't say, right, let's open everything up now, rather. He can't do that. So that's already immediately out of his control. There's something that he can't do to make things right. But if you'll say, well, what about his overall plan? What I would say he's doing is, even with the tax increases he had planned, we might say a bit of detail about where they're hitting, he's still effectively trying to plan a budget mainly using borrowed money.
Yes. Well, I think
so. I would say don't do that. I mean, if you ask me what would I do, I wouldn't have a plan based so heavily on borrowing money.
Yeah, well, I think this is what let's get to the number of this, because many analysts have said, on the surface, spending money to plug gaps and to try and keep people in employment is a good thing. And on the surface, it is, with the logic from his perspective that he feels that having people in work is great. The thing here is, if you actually look at the reality, it's flawed, because many, many people, millions, are still in a mothball situation, meaning that whilst the government, and to a certain extent because of the mechanism, companies are contributing to employees, many people, certainly by the end of September 2021, would have been in a mothball situation for a year and a half, meaning that they have not used their skills, and actually, essentially, they've mothballed the business, meaning it probably has lost its customer base. It's not a viable business. And this is where I think the lack of strategy has gone. He's done a blanket approach. Essentially, he's put the nation in further debt. What will happen is, come October from 2021 onwards, we're going to see a spike in unemployment. I believe that what we will also see is that some businesses just won't be able to open up in the way that they will expect. Which business do we mean? Let's start with them. So certainly in the hospitality sector, people who are in the pubs, the clubs, people in the travel industry, people who had a customer base which has now been lost. Now they're going to get some of them back because people are desperate to travel when that happens. But the fact is that many of those industries have already shed a lot of staff. And the fact of it is that also from a skill set point of view, if you, and I think everyone can sort of try and relate to this, is that if you don't practice for a year and a half, whatever you're doing, you're not honing in your skills. So therefore, I think what's also going to happen is that when Britain goes to the market and says we're open again, they're not going to be able to compete in the same way. I think quality of service is going to be down. I think retail will also struggle. And I also think that what you will also see is that as the pressures on global trading starts to sort of look at the interest rates, because one of the things that is key, and this does worry people, whether it's this year, next year, or even in 5 years' time, if the interest rates, which are relatively low today, remain, that's great. But what happens if they start to increase? Suddenly Britain's debt, and the payback is really a mountain to climb. It's already a mountain because of the amount of debt that we've inherited already. And so, to me, I think that there is nothing wrong with spending money in the right way and even borrowing money to help organizations. And here's the controversial one, and we have to talk about it. There is a lot of concern about the money that is being invested in the NHS and in public sectors. One of the things that have come to light recently, which is, and it's all over the media, which is, should nurses and people in healthcare be given a pay increase? At the moment, it was offered by the government as a 1% increase. Many people believe it should be a lot more. It was deemed that last year there was an agreement that it would be much higher, 2%, 2.5%, effectively above inflation. Now, what Rishi Sunak is saying is the government has offered a certain amount, but the country can't afford it. Well, not surprising. So, Mr. Sunak, because when you start to balance things up and weigh things up, getting further and further into debt, there isn't that ability, those seeds that you sow, i.e. you spend £1 and hopefully you're looking to get some return. I can't see where he's been putting his money where he's going to get a return. Essentially what he's doing is he's just putting it into a black hole. And the fact is, and this is the thing that many people don't like to hear, the NHS is a great service, but we can't afford it in the way that we've enjoyed for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It's just simply not possible. And yet the demands on the service are greater. So if we just talk about that one thing, because it is a big cost to the nation, what's your thoughts on paying nurses more and investing further in the NHS? What's your thought on what we should do there?
Well, the just dealing with the paying the nurses thing, I think if paying them in line with inflation is reasonable. Paying them more than that is lunacy. I don't think you should be paying more money than inflation. So the current offer of 1%, I think, far from being derisory to the nurses, is a bit of a smack in the face to all those people who are going to or have lost their jobs or companies. They're not getting an increase. So I think offering a reasonable increase, and I think politically giving such an increase to nurses of 1% will work for the government. So I think they should stick to their guns. So on both sides, no, we are going to give the increase. No, it's not going to be more than 1%. And I would say that's reasonable. The current rate of inflation, although predicted to rise to 1.5%, well, I'll believe that when it happens, is now about 0.9%. So, it's about the rate of inflation. So it seems reasonable. Now, as to you were talking about investing in the NHS, what should we be pouring money into the NHS going forward? Well, this is a problem in that the NHS has, if you analyse how it performed during the pandemic, it didn't really perform that well, to be honest. You could say that's due to lack of investment, lack of training. There is a problem, actually, in the way that nurses are utilised. Just to speak to that briefly, but then I can see how that relates to investment. Nurses tend to act like sort of, I suppose, mini doctors at the moment. They can prescribe some drugs, etc. Pharmacists the same, and so you can't get a sort of nursing at its basic level, which you need a lot of people to do. So there's too much training, so it's too expensive. I would say you need a big shake-up of the NHS. I can't see this happening, but this is what my advice would be. And again, that's not all down to the Chancellor, of course, because that's a different department. But what needs to happen is a big shake of the NHS to be run in a different way so that less money is spent on it. And that could happen, but it's not going to happen now. We need it to happen now. I don't see a way round increasing paying the NHS just to keep it functioning over the next few years. I think you've got to build the new hospitals or upgrade them. You can't have have there not being enough equipment or enough trained staff. I don't see a way around it. So the only thing that I would say, just before I hand it back to you, Mark, the only thing I would say is that's not an area that you can change and get quick savings from. It's not an area that can be tackled like that. Yes, you shouldn't necessarily be building maybe huge experimental hospital training facilities or something like that, but you need to keep it functioning, and it has been underfunded in certain areas for years. So I would say the way forward is to get more money coming in to the Treasury, more wealth creation. Yes. That's the sort of policies you got to be looking at.
I agree.
Not saving money specifically.
Absolutely. Nobody has a problem with the service that the NHS has in principle, but in order for the NHS to succeed, the economy, as in its service and manufacturing bases, are where the money would come from.
Yeah.
And essentially what's happening is the focus has gone wrong. And that's why I think that the reality is that at this moment in time, the strategy is wrong. Yes, I completely agree. I think, we want to give nurses more. We wanted the doctors give more, and definitely more investments in equipment, etc. Of course. But the reality is, because of subsequent governments not having the right focus on investment certainly in the manufacturing areas, because we're too service-based, this is where we talk about this a lot. What I think we are looking for is those innovative strategies and investment in innovative services and manufacturing areas, whether it be technology, whether that be in car and manufacturing, whether that be in design, that's engineering design, to be able to compete with not only European countries, but also global countries. And so I think that what's interesting here is that this is where I think that Rishi Sunak could have actually used this moment to have said, look, we reached a break point on the NHS. And what I think he could have done is said, look, in order to keep and maintain the NHS, we're going to have to freeze salaries for a period.
You're saying freeze the nurses' salaries as well?
Unfortunately, the way it's going at the moment is because he is, and I come back to it's a little bit like the phrase "penny wise, pound foolish," meaning that he's put his efforts into something which is to try and put a stopgap, and I understand that it had to happen at the beginning of 2020. But what he's done is he's mothballed the problem and hasn't found a solution. And the problem just keeps growing. And what I think he should be doing is he should be thinking about how the economy can thrive. What he's doing is he's already laid out that corporate companies are going to be taxed more. this is corporate tax, is going to go from 19% to 25%. That's a big increase. It's not straight away, but the point here is that there's less incentives for companies in this country, especially where we were trying to encourage people to invest more. And what I think is that I'm not saying that he can't do it. I think it's a big increase, incidentally. But what I do think that he should have been doing is he should have been putting his pound in the right place to encourage and incentivize companies to employ people in the right sectors where it matters. I understand that there are certain sectors that will suffer. We know that because in service-based industries where you had this gig economy, it's inevitable that there were going to be people who were going to lose out. Unfortunately, we can't wind the clock back to basically shut the country down in January 2020. We just couldn't do that. We can't do that. If we had done that, maybe we would be in a better situation and COVID-19 wouldn't have had the same impact. But the fact is, it has had an impact. And I just think that what we've done now is just put another problem, a greater problem on the table for generations to come. I can't see how companies thinking about on a global level, certainly international companies, why they would even consider investing in the United Kingdom at this moment in time. Many organizations such as banks have already shifted their talent to mainland Europe. Technology companies are thinking more globally, and they're sort of thinking that way. They're worried about the corporate tax. It does concern me about what is it that we want to be as a nation, but also where are we going to encourage those entrepreneurs? Because there isn't that investment in the right place. Now, there are many examples of probably listeners screaming at this podcast saying, yes, well, we got some government funding, and yes, there are some important British companies that are thriving. Yes, there are, but there's just not enough. We now got a problem is how do we solve the debt issue? Because that's not going to go away. That's committed. Rishi Sunak has already committed.
Agreed, yeah.
And so what I would be looking for is something where it was a clearer plan to say, I'm now putting aside X amount of money where I know that certain industries are going to disappear, whether that be in the hospitality industry or wherever. But what I am going to do is I'm going to now put a line in the sand for once and for all where governments have failed to invest in innovation and manufacturing and the right type of industries that will help us. Yes. So one of the other things, just to sort of conclude on this point, this is where I think many people felt that he didn't do enough. He didn't do enough for the environment. He felt there was a lot that he could have done, which incidentally would have helped Britain's long-term future, being, of course, very reliant on oil. We wanted to invest in much more sustainable types of fuels. House prices have been an issue for people getting on the house front. There was perhaps a lot more that could have been done on that front. And I think that we could keep going around all the different industries. So to me, it was very, very short term. It was very much a stopgap. And that's why I think that what he's done is he's lost control of the finances.
Yes. Now, do you think that, although you can argue that he needed to put a corporation tax to make some attempt, at least, to balance in the books, but do you think that some targeted tax breaks, some more new tax holidays for new companies in certain areas would have been a better plan?
Well, I think that what he could have done for companies who are existing, and also with the view of companies that can invest. So I wouldn't have a second-class investment organization. I'd keep it flat in the sense that if you're not in the United Kingdom, or whether you are in the United Kingdom, I personally feel that to boost the economy, I think he could have had tax breaks for certain types of industries. And I think that, and I know that might alienate some, but the key is there are some industries that are vital to our economy. The technology, the car industry, I think, science-based industries.
I think this is right, because this is something that's often missed. If you give a tax break for an industry in order for it to grow, or for new companies maybe setting up in the area that you want people to grow, you are basically investing. It doesn't cost you anything. You're getting a tax break, which just means it's money that you
it is
don't
a sort of pseudo investment. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and so that's a way of encouraging wealth creation, which is what we need. So that's just one example. I feel that he's sort of thinking in that area, but each time I look at it, he's looking like he's trying to protect what's there rather than release people to create wealth. So I mean, even an attempt
protecting the wrong thing.
Yes, I guess that's true as well.
Scattergun. That's the problem.
So yes, a proper strategy of which areas of the economy do we want to grow, which are likely to grow, and one way to support them is tax breaks. Rather than investment, rather than pouring more money in, so having to borrow more money. That's the basic outlook that I would have. That's different to Rishi Sunak, but I've noticed that he doesn't always. These chancellors don't always make their policy based on the Market Beat podcast. If only they would just think what state the country would be in now.
Well, I wonder, and I know that we don't want to get personal here, but let's be honest, Mr. Sunak and Mrs. Sunak are a wealthy couple.
Yes, and you could say that they don't see the problem. It is a possibility. Yes.
Well, there's part of that, but the fact of the matter is that what's happening now is that many people, as was also highlighted as a criticism of the budget, with people who are on the breadline, you can see that what he's done at the lower end sort of pseudo helps. But the fact of the matter is that one of the things that people often haven't talked about is that, and I wouldn't blame Sunak on this, but he should be mindful of it when he was setting his budget recently. When he became Chancellor, a lot of the people that he was setting budgets for, i.e. British people, were in terrible debt. They're even in further terrible debt. I'm talking about personal debt. I'm not talking about necessary company debt or even national debt. It's a separate range of debt. And what this has done, COVID-19, is it's plunged many, many communities into yet further issues. And that sad infliction on them is partly because there was very much an encouragement for people to just borrow and borrow and borrow. And unfortunately, when we look at then what happened in 2020, then going into 2021, I think now he's got a bigger issue, because I can see that more people potentially will go bankrupt. That's one issue.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I think that there are families who, sadly, unfortunately, whether they're single parent families, won't get as much from the state going further forward. I will say the other thing that, and this is the controversial one, because nobody likes this 3-letter word. Yes, it's tax. And that is that I think that what he could have done, bearing in mind that we're in unprecedented times, he could have looked at those who could possibly have helped a bit more. So what he's done is he hasn't actually raised taxes. And I'm not saying he raises taxes to everybody, but he could have done it at certain thresholds. So again, not to sort of squeeze people dramatically, but he could have put in a ratcheted system, which could have certainly been started in 2021 and eased off after, say, 2023, 2024. And I think that that's what I am surprised that he didn't do.
Yeah.
And here's the other one. And I know it's a very controversial one. It's not necessarily to do with tax, but it is all to do with funds, and it's about the nation. I'm surprised that they didn't push out the pension age, because although that we all struggle, we do know that we're living longer, and I'm surprised that he didn't push it out again. Now, those monies that he wouldn't have had to pay it out, and remember, think about this, at some point he's got to pay back the debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's the interest. So that whichever way around you want to look at it, it's a pile of money. So whether he's paying off the interest, whether he's paying off the actual capital debt, doesn't really matter. Either way, it's paying back. And he has to find mechanisms. And I don't think there's enough mechanisms that he's put in place as what I'll call an emergency set. And I think he could have done much more.
Yes.
And so I suppose, Clergyman Pete, I mean, from your perspective, and I was thinking this not just for those who are in industry today, whatever you're paying as a contributing taxpayer, but to those people who are going to go into industry, what does life look like over the next 10, 20 years?
Yes, it's not looking good, is it? I mean, yes, my particular career is very unusual and probably unaffected by what the Chancellor's just done. But for many people, and for people who it's my responsibility to serve in this area as a vicar, for those who don't know, in the northwest of England, it's gonna make a big dent into the employment figures, and people are going to be poor. Yeah. I mean, as in their salaries are not going to be worth as much. Yes, they're not going to go up by much, but the money is going to be worth less and less. And when you look at that, you say, well, what do I do about it? So I've got a plan within the churches that I run that we're trying to organise. We're already organised to a certain extent to provide cheap food to people and cheap basic items of clothing to people, because they're just simply going to be suddenly, in very difficult circumstances, going to be a huge increase in unemployment. We know this when the furlough schemes end in September. So we're looking for people being in a very hard time, and then there's not much hope for the future. Unless, of course, maybe next year Rishi Sunak will make a bit of fist of it.
Well, I wanted to mention one last point, which is around the property one, because it is a huge generator for obviously what was previously stamp duty. Now, what they did do, Rishi Sunak, is he extended the stamp duty, and many people would say, this is what we'll call a holiday period. Essentially, if you purchase a property over a certain threshold, you don't have to pay a certain levy, a tax. Well, the problem with that is, and this is why I say he's lost control of the finances, what that seems like on the surface, like a great idea, but look what's actually happened. As a result of implementing that policy, house prices have jumped dramatically.
Yes.
And so now, ironically, what it means is, for anyone who's trying to purchase a property, those properties are now more expensive because it's about value.
No, you're right.
It doesn't matter whether it's a piece of land, whether it's a particular building, whether it's a corporate building, or whether it's a house to live in. If you cut at one end, you've got to think of the consequence at the other. And this is why I think, in summary, what he's done, he's been very, very short term in the thinking, but hasn't thought of the consequences. Well, anyway, listeners, what do you think about this? Do you feel that Rishi Sunak has got the strategy right? Do you think that everything is going perfectly well and we will get out of this mess in a very short period of time? But if you happen to be living on Mars, do let us know. However, in reality, maybe you think that you're seeing the pain, and maybe there's going to be more pain in the future. Why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts? Well, thank you for joining this, and we have answers to many more topical topics. So join us again next time with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.